With my DM's guide to Baldur's Gate 3, I'll set you up with every single scenario you might encounter while playing D&D with friends now. Has this ever happened to you? Has a player made a sexy vampire rogue with white curly hair that tends to still miss when he has a 94% chance to hit? I've got you covered. Just remind him that he would actually have sun blindness since he doesn't have a superpowered tadpole in his eye, and he'll stop playing in a second. Has this ever happened to you? Does a character want to jump using their bonus action? Put weights on their character so they can. The book is infinitely large, and the human mind could literally never comprehend how many pages it is. But don't worry, I have. Check out the DM's Guide to Baldur's Gate 3 now. I haven't slept since the game came out. Baldur's Gate 3. I've played it. You've played it. My grandfather, who can barely work his flip phone, has played it. It's a worldwide phenomenon, and it's easy to see why. A world created with the most gentle and detailed hands you could ever imagine. You walk 3 feet in this game and there's something to do. And it's not a meaningless one-off thing. No. It helps paint the world of Faerun that we find ourselves in all of its glory and disgust. And the characters in the game are a chef's kiss. Like, each and every single one of them has this wonderful hook that gets you interested in their story and leaves you wanting more. And trust me, they have more. It's a wonderful game, and my time with it has been unmatched. But what makes it so special? The streamlined and approachable gameplay loop? Is it the beautiful world? Is it the characters that are drop-dead gorgeous that your eyes have to readjust to the sad reality without them when you finally pry your gaze away from the screen? Well, it's a mix of all those things, and really the whole point of this video. I'm here to talk about how Baldur's Gate 3 has specifically done wonders for my enjoyment of D&D, and how you and I, as players and dungeon masters, can learn a thing or two from the game. A DM's Guide to Baldur's Gate 3. He said the name of the video, wow! And nothing else. Nada. Zilch. We're totally not going to talk about the negative effects the game has had and will continue to have on the D&D community at large. Why would we do that? Yeah, we're gonna talk about those things. I'm gonna deem all the stuff I talk about in these negative sections the Baldur's Gate 3 effect, or maybe just the Baldur's Gate effect. Similar to the Matt Mercer effect, which came about after millions of people started watching Critical Role and then got into actually playing Dungeons & Dragons, we can really boil the idea down to people's expectations of what D&D will be like after consuming a piece of media, and hoping that their home game will be exactly that piece of media that they consumed. And it's nothing catastrophic, just certain pitfalls that the community falls into. Please do not take this as a cynical approach to the game. It's more conversations I've had with a few friends and things I wanted to expand upon for the sake of an open dialogue. Don't throw tomatoes at me.
Big Bam Baloney?
So there you are. You just spent 50 hours in the character creation trying to figure out which of the Septim Pearsons you want to roleplay as, and you're dropped into the world of the Forgotten Realms.
One of the oldest and most detailed settings that D&D has the pleasure of having in its wheelhouse.
There are thousands of books set in this world, and I'm positive there are millions of campaigns that are also set in it. And it's deep, both in rich lore and history. And it's all there for you to explore. After getting dropped off the Mind Flayer ship on the Sword Coast, you've got a little surprise in your head, and you need to get it out before it pops like a party cracker. But how do you go about doing that is completely up to you. You're given dozens of options just in the first couple hours of gameplay. Maybe you take Auntie Ethel up on her offer to trade an eye for a lobotomy. Or perhaps you want to test your luck with Volo's eye surgery. There are options, and that's what Baldur's Gate 3 excels at. The world is your oyster, and it's buck-a-shuck, baby. At least a contained oyster, depending on what meal/act you are in at the current moment. Want to go raid the goblin camp? Want to go save an owl bear cub? maybe you fancy opening up an ancient book of necromancy to figure out its secrets. You can do it. Baldur's Gate 3 is chock full of small adventures to go on. You can easily load up the game, travel down one pathway of a road, and find an interesting character or side event, and finish that side character's quest or in that event, and just close the game. 3 hours tops. Maybe more like 4.5. You start to really lose track after 6 hours in the game, and this is something we should take notice of as D&D people. Fill your world with things for your players to do, even if they're inconsequential. They're a thing that a player can engage in, and that's what matters. The more you can put into the world, the more the world will give back to you. And I don't mean this in a metaphysical sense. I mean this in the sense that the more decisions your players have to make as their character, as they react to your scenarios, the more you can get them to think in character. A lot of D&D, at least what I try to write, is player-focused. What are my players' goals? How can I help them develop their character even in the slightest? Are they having fun? These are questions I ask myself multiple times while writing a town or a situation, but sometimes I can just give my players a random encounter, and that can be the ignition point of something greater. For example, in one of my games, a player was hypnotized by a creature and started to attack their teammates. And even though this was like a smaller mechanic that I wanted to put into the larger fight I was planning, in reality, the player getting attacked by the hypnotized character changed their attitude about that character in the future, becoming a little less trustworthy, a little more on edge whenever they entered combat again. And it led to larger, fascinating discussions of trusts and bonds at the table, finally ending in a pact between those two players. If either one were to be hypnotized in the future, the first thing they would do for each other was help them break out of their confusion. The smallest thing can spark the imagination and lead to groundbreaking discoveries for not only characters, but the worlds you're creating. Trust me, the more you can add to your world, the more you can get out of it. And it's time-consuming to develop these little details, but you and your players will thank you for it later. Now it's time to talk about the negative. What's the problem with Baldur's Gate 3's massive and detailed world? The very fact that it is massive and detailed. There were like hundreds of people working on this game, and not to mention the Forgotten Realms has been around since the 1960s, when Ed Greenwood, the creator of the world, started to write it as a child. It had years of development, and your game won't have that, I'm sorry to say. More power to the DMs that do put that amount of time into their games, and I'm not discouraging people for wanting to make their worlds more detailed. I just don't think it should be the expectation moving forward. As a DM for a couple of campaigns now, it takes hours to come up with a single NPC. You might have a stroke of genius and make a town in 30 minutes, but then to go back and put in all those little intricacies to further your player's character development will take full days. And writing everything isn't even the hardest part. You then have to play it out. A single person playing out all the scenarios of a dungeon is bound to make at least one mistake. Now, this is not me bashing on people expecting more out of their D&D games. I try to make my stuff as cinematic and enjoyable as possible, but when something slips up, don't go haywire over it. Same goes for a player who might miss something, or maybe didn't engage with an event the DM spent 30 minutes of their time making. Don't make them feel bad for missing that thing. In Baldur's Gate 3, you're playing with and against thousands of lines of code that is built on math and precision. In regular D&D, you're playing with humans, and they're going to fail, and fail often. Almost as often as that Justarian who can't hit a 95% shot! Ugh! So yes, I love Baldur's Gate 3's open world, and I've made sure to use it as inspiration from when I'm creating my own world, but it's not the be-all, end-all. Now, a world is great, but what is a world without characters? That's not a general question. I'm actually going to answer it. I'm trying to segue into the next part. The cast of Baldur's Gate 3 is massive. Not even talking about your party composition, we have so many shifting parts. You got the previously mentioned party, the NPCs you will find yourself talking to in various towns and campsites, enemies you might strike up a conversation with, and even the gosh darn animals, which have the best dialogue in the game. so please make sure someone in your party has speak with animals. Oh, hail his majesty. Let's start with the party. We got Asterion, everyone's favorite piece of paper looking vamp who seriously needs a V8. Gale, the cocky wizard that needs to munch or he'll Lae'zel, our badass fighter who may have some problems back at home. Karlach, the muscle mommy of the group, and always ready to hit the yoinkity sploinkity. Shart, our mysterious cleric who looks like she works at a Barnes & Noble and has made me discover I'm really into book play. And Will, who I didn't really use at the beginning, but the more I got into the game, the more his story with his father and with his pact became fascinating to me. These are all complex people with hours of voice-acted dialogue and well-thought-out story beats and character arcs. Like, huge props to these voice actors. I have developed a crippling parasocial relationship with them. Kudos to the writers as well. I mean, I said these characters are really deep, but I want to talk about how interesting they are just at the get-go. For example, Gale, typical wizard who thinks he knows everything and is the best thing since sliced bread. But he's still a very insanely kind person, approving of any choice you make that helps somebody else out. Why? We find out that Gale has a little heartburn problem. He danced a little too close with the literal weave of magic itself and is now a ticking time bomb who must be satiated by magical items. And that's the hook, or at least that's what it was for me. I hated giving him magical items because I'm a hoarder, but I gave him those items because I didn't want to see him die. I enjoyed his kind-hearted nature and his ability to roast anyone with his expertise in wit and knowledge. But the time bomb aspect put a sense of urgency in me as a player. What was gonna happen next? Was I ever gonna get to the point where I gave him too many magical items and he exploded? When would he have his fill? It was fascinating. But it came from this very basic concept of a character. A human wizard with aspirations for something more. This is what I strive to do with any of my PCs. I like them to have an extra set of bones, something that not only engages me as the player of the said character, but intrigues the other players at the table so that they interact with my character and create party development. And it takes time to find that hook. I've been working on this generic human fighter for like 3 months and just now figured out what I want to do with them. I want a woman with a husband who is a very skilled Coliseum fighter who is unexplicably killed during the match. And left with nothing else, she dons his gear, hides her identity, and takes his spot in the Coliseum so that she can support their child. Now, I'm not saying this is perfect character design. I'm not perfect, but it gives me and other players so much to work with. Who does she unveil her identity to? What are the typical roles of classes and gender we see in D&D, and how can we twist those? Does this other personality she has built for herself take over, and does she have to discover herself again? And I implore people to do the same thing. Find those hidden complexities you can put into your character. Generate those hooks that every player at the table, even the DM, can engage with something, especially the DM. Because much like the characters in Baldur's Gate 3 are fleshed out by the developers with their own unique situations, your DM can throw their own hat in the ring to help make even you more interested in your character. Now, what we don't want to do as a community is expect people to always have these detailed characters. Sometimes people just want to play a warlock because they look cool. They don't have to have these long, intricate backstories or moral dilemmas. As a DM, you may be able to pique their interest with something deeper, but if they don't feel the need to be something more, don't force them into something. The same goes for players. Your DM, who has created like the 20 NPCs it takes to fill his small fishing village, are not going to be expertly crafted. Bob the blacksmith and Israel the innkeeper might have the same voice, and that's okay. I will say, I am used to Baldur's Gate 3's NPCs who have all their own voice acting and have these sprawling stories that evolve and change with any of the different options I pick, but I'm not going to fault my friend who isn't the best at doing accents. I know he put the work into those characters, and I think that matters over anything else. This kind of goes back to the world building segment, and something I would always tell my friends when they get discouraged that they're not being able to perform to the ability of like a Laura Bailey or a Neil Newbon, and their characters don't sound like they want them to. I would tell them this: you know, we're not getting paid to do this. We're not part of this multi-layered production. We're just playing D&D. We're trying to have While writing this and thinking about what I wanted the thesis of this video to be, I struggled quite a lot. I asked myself large questions. Why do I play D&D? What kept me coming back? Why have I sunk over 50 hours into Baldur's Gate 3 and probably gonna do like 3 more playthroughs of the game? It's fun. That's the simplest solution I could come up with, and to be honest, I don't think it has to be anything more than that. I liked to play D&D because it's fun. It's fun to hang out with my friends. It's fun to engage in a story that my friend or I have created together. It's fun to be and play something that's not your normal everyday life. It's escapism at its finest. And that's what we should make D&D. Fun, enjoyable, other synonyms. There's rules and stuff to D&D, and playing by those rules is what gives the game inherent structure. But if you don't want to play with those rules, don't. That's why there's like 70 different systems to play a tabletop RPG. In the community of tabletop RPGs, there's the rule of cool, which is when you forego or change the systems that you're playing with for the sake of coolness. You know, this might be a really sick attack your player wants to do, or twisting the wording of a spell so it can affect a certain aspect that the original spell didn't describe. And this is a widely known thing that even the developers of the 5e system in many tabletop RPG systems have adopted. They've approved of us to change things. You know, some people aren't the biggest fan of it. They like to play their games as realistic and rules-driven as possible, and that's completely fine. If they find that fun, then they should do that. In the end, whatever you and your group find fun, you should do. Have a conversation with them and figure out what your group enjoys the most. A single session 0, where you and your group go over the expectations of what you want the game to be and what you want to focus in on, will work wonders. I mean, that's the basics of D&D. It's people with a passion coming together to do something fun. And Larian has immaculately captured that in Baldur's Gate 3. I haven't had this much fun with a video game in years, and it's not just one aspect of the game either. It's the story, the world, the characters, the combat. It's just fun. And you know what? It's fun to talk about too. I mean, this is kind of a side tangent, but I was in a couple shows recently, theater shows, and I could not tell you how many times I was talking to somebody and I would slightly mention Baldur's Gate 3 and they'd be like, oh, you play Baldur's Gate 3 too? And we'd have like a full-on hour-long conversation about it. And this happens with some games, but I feel like it hasn't happened with a video game in so long. And it usually only happens with, you know, when I'm playing D&D with my friends. We're talking about a character we built, or we're talking about a storyline that we created or something like that. Like, Baldur's Gate 3 gets so many things right. And I think that's why we as a community have, you know, grappled onto it so much. It's fun to talk about, and that's all that matters. Are you guys having fun? I am. Totally. I do wish, though, we could have maybe more character moments, or like survival aspects. My character's a ranger, so maybe I have to like hunt and gather materials to do setup for camp. Ooh, I like that. It gives time for my goblins to like talk to each other, and maybe one of them goes out to help you or something like that. Ooh, yeah, that sounds like so much fun. My druid will come along too, and I'll be able to pick up all the different flowers of the forest, and I'll catalog them into my book. And sometimes it's as easy as just asking the question. So my overall advice, don't stress about things as much. Let your mind wander and get a little kooky when you're writing, or let your players lead you down a path that might be just a little bit zanier. I'm sure you'll have just as much fun as they do. Hey, what's up, guys? Had a guy record that for me, so thanks, shout out to that random gym guy. Hope you guys liked the video. Thanks for making it to the end. You made it. Congratulations. Spent a long time on this one, so my apologies. But looking forward to getting you some more content. Thanks for all the views on the Persona video. When that shit hit 100, I was like, oh my god. So thanks, guys. Do the usual, comment, subscribe, all that type of stuff. I'll see you in the next one.